5 square miles of what are Inca ruins dating back several centuries. Locals tell Bingham the site is called Machu Picchu.
High in the Andes lies a secret that refuses to stay silent. Peru's megalithic ruins, Sacsayhuamán, Ollantaytambo, and Machu Picchu, have baffled scientists for centuries. These aren't just walls of stone, they are puzzles of impossible weight and mind-bending precision. The Incas denied building them. Legends spoke of gods, and skeptics called it a myth. But in 2025, Google's AI dug deeper than any archaeologist ever could. What it uncovered may rewrite history itself. Were these walls carved by human hands, or by something we've forgotten? Stones that break science. High in the Peruvian Andes, the air grows thin, the mountains cut sharply into the sky, and ancient walls stretch across ridges as if mocking gravity itself. At first glance, they look like ruins, weathered blocks of stone stacked into place. But as you get closer, the illusion fades. These aren't bricks. They're colossal, multi-sided stones, some weighing over 100 tons, cut into impossible shapes, and locked together with such flawless precision that even a razor blade can't slip through the seams. It's as though the builders bent nature to their will, reshaping the hardest rock on earth like clay in their hands. Take Sacsayhuamán, the fortress overlooking Cusco. Here, massive limestone blocks interlock in a puzzle that makes modern engineers shake their heads. Imagine trying to assemble a three-dimensional jigsaw puzzle where every piece is the size of a car. And not just one car, but 60 cars stacked into a single block of stone. No mortar, no adhesive, no reinforcement. Just stone against stone, fitted so perfectly that the wall has survived for centuries in one of the most earthquake-prone regions on the planet. When colonial buildings crumbled during tremors, these walls shifted, danced, and settled back without collapsing. It's as if they were designed to move with the earth itself. Centuries before, earthquake-resistant architecture was even a concept. It is not the only mystery, as Sacsayhuamán goes to Ollantaytambo. Here, pink granite monoliths rise in absolutely perfect alignment, with each weighing more than 50 tons. Miles away, across the river and up another mountain, was this quarry made for this granite. It was not just next door. No wheel, no crane, and no beast of burden strong enough to haul them. So how were they moved? Historians wave their hands with theories. Maybe thousands of workers used ropes and logs. Yet no trace of such a massive logistical operation has ever been found. What remains is silence, and stones that laugh at the limitations of ancient tools. And tools. That's really where this dreary stretching of the story runs into utter impossibility.
The Inca are really well known for their incredible stonework, and the stones fit together perfectly without any mortar.
The Inca were indeed skilled stonemasons. Nobody denies that. But the stones they supposedly carved, andesite and diorite 7 and 8, on the Mohs hardness scale. The highest point in that scale, to give a point of reference, is diamond and rates a 10. The best tools the Incas are known to have had were made of bronze and copper, materials that sit at a mere 3 or 4 on that same scale. Imagine trying to carve your kitchen granite countertop with a plastic spoon. That's the scale of absurdity we're up against. But somehow the stones are not mere carvings. They are really sculptured. Smooth curved surfaces, perfect right angles, and intricate notches seem as though machined with advanced equipment. Most famous of all, the 12-angled stone of Cusco fits so closely with its neighbors that it looks melted into the position as though the rock itself were softened and molded like clay. But it really cannot be achieved by any known natural processes. If this work were attempted today with our diamond saws, cranes, and computer modeling, it would cost millions of dollars and would take months of work. Here, however, are walls, terraces, and temples built centuries ago by means unknown. Naturally, we call them ruins, but what they are, in fact, is a standing challenge. A taunt from across time, challenging us to prove the unprovable. If the Incas themselves admitted they didn't build these walls, then who did? The answer lies in history's strangest silence. Voices of forgotten builders. When the Spanish conquistadors marched into the Andes in the 1500s, they expected gold, silver, and conquest. What they did not expect were walls of stone that dwarfed their cathedrals back home. These monoliths were so precise, so unshakable, that even the battle-hardened soldiers stood in awe. Naturally, they turned to the Inca rulers for an explanation. "How did you build these?" they asked, imagining tales of armies laboring for decades, of kings commanding thousands to move mountains. But the answer they received stunned them into silence. The Inca said simply, "We didn't build them." They pointed to a people they called the Viracocha, the ones who came before, the mysterious civilization of gods or giants who left behind these indestructible works. To the Spaniards, this sounded like a myth, a convenient excuse. But the Inca weren't joking. They themselves were expert builders, yes, but they admitted openly that these megalithic foundations were not their own. They had inherited them, built upon them, and integrated them into their cities. In their worldview, these colossal stones were the legacy of an earlier, more powerful race. So much so that the evidence for that is carved in actual stone. Walk in Cusco or Ollantaytambo, and very soon a strange contrast would reveal itself to even the most casual observer. It is spread across any number of walls by means of those painted monstrous blocks, polygonal stones that have been cut with impossible precision and interlocked so well that they seem a single rock, even at the base. Outside the cut stone and along the wall, however, the changes occur: simple stones piled up in ragtag disorder, bound with clay mortar. The lower layers seem to be made by machines. The upper layers, rather, appear human, almost crude by comparison, as if one were to lay up the foundation of a towering skyscraper and, centuries later, another culture just slapped a log cabin on top of it. That contrast is no imagination. It's the archaeological record. The Spaniards, conquered by their obsession with glory, disdained the words of the Incas as legend. Yet, the tales have caught on, traveling down orally through the generations. Locals recount the myths of beings that could move mountains at a sound, or knew about plants with which one could soften rock until it could be shaped as clay. To the modern ear, these myths sound far-fetched, not really possible. But just stop for a moment. How would an ancient farmer describe advanced technology? If one would present a helicopter to a man of the Middle Ages, he would call it dragonfires. Myth is often another name used by people to talk about something that they can't quite understand. There is something more, physical evidence that converges almost very well with those stories. At some places in Sacsayhuamán, scientists have found strange scoop-like marks on huge blocks. They do not look like chiseling marks or hammer blows. They resemble marks left as if giant ice cream scoops carved out sections of rock, weighing hundreds of pounds. Smooth, uniform, unnatural. These were the scars, perhaps, of a lost stone softening technique? Or could they belong to vibrational tools capable of slicing through rock as easily as butter? Read more about it here. The legends sound less like fantasies when you're looking directly at the marks left behind. So what does this mean? If the Inca didn't build these megaliths, then who did? Who were the Viracocha, a ghost civilization for which we have no written records or name in our history books, but their fingerprints can be found on some of the most durable structures on Earth. For centuries, this is where the trail went cold. The myths remained, but evidence escaped them. Scholars dismissed them as tales, while archaeologists would argue over dates, and the stones stood in silence. But silence does not imply absence. Amid this void, in the early 21st century, a different breed of archaeologist showed up, not of flesh and blood, but of code and computation, one that would never tire from processing terabytes of scans, maps, and images. When researchers began questioning Google's artificial intelligence, they were not prepared for a collision of myth and science. But that is precisely what happened. Myths are clues, but they aren't proof. To break this deadlock, researchers turned to a machine with no bias and no fatigue: Google's AI. Google's digital archaeologist. For centuries, archaeologists measured, mapped, and debated. But measuring the same stone 100 times only gets you so far. Human eyes see details, but they miss patterns, especially when those patterns stretch across hundreds of miles and thousands of years. That's where a new kind of investigator stepped in: artificial intelligence. Google's AI wasn't programmed to chase myths. It was designed to find patterns invisible to us. And when researchers fed it mountains of archaeological data, it revealed something no one expected. The experiment began with raw information: high-resolution drone footage of Peruvian ruins, LiDAR scans peeling away jungle canopies to expose hidden terraces, ground-penetrating radar mapping subterranean chambers, geological surveys cataloging the types of stone and their sources, astronomical alignment data showing how walls and windows pointed toward solstices or constellations. To human researchers, it was overwhelming, a library of fragments without a clear story. But to Google's neural networks, it was fuel. The AI scanned every angle, curve, and surface. Then it began to spot redundancies, cried out the same unique cuts and interlocking shapes in ruins scattered hundreds of miles apart. Identical polygonal angles turned up in both Cusco and Ollantaytambo, even if conventional history maintains that these were built at different times by different cultures. The AI didn't see separate civilizations. It saw just one fingerprint repeating itself, like that of one master builder stamped all over the Andes. The analysis of an increasing number of sites not just strengthened the pattern, it showed quite the reverse. Across valleys and mountains, dozens of sites shared the same astronomical precision. Walls were aligned not just to the sun, but to star clusters down to 1 or 2 fractions of a degree. In random coincidence, probability calculations by the AI suggested that the chance of so many sites sharing these very same alignments by pure chance is less than 1%. Hence, the real bombshell conclusion: these ruins were not each separate projects. They were part of an integrated system, built by one single civilization with advanced knowledge of both engineering and that cosmos, with breathtaking implications. The AI of Google concluded with 99% confidence that the megalithic ruins in Peru were not the work of separate cultures building in isolation. They were the binding legacy of one single, highly advanced civilization, so far advanced that they could put a finger on anything we could think of.
One of our personal favorite ancient sites is the ancient fortress of Sacsayhuamán. We believe this site was built an unimaginably long time ago.
A civilization that had the audacity to standardize construction over impossible distances and encode astronomical knowledge into its very foundations. The AI proved these sites were linked by a single, lost civilization. But knowing how doesn't explain why they vanished so completely. The day the world drowned, Imagine a civilization so advanced that it could bend stone like clay, move mountains with sound, and chart the stars with flawless precision. Now imagine that same civilization erased in a single generation. Its knowledge scattered, its cities washed away, its survivors left with nothing but memory. That isn't fantasy. That's exactly what scientists believe may have happened during one of Earth's greatest cataclysms, the Younger Dryas. Around 12,000 years ago, something unimaginable struck the planet. Geological evidence points to a sudden shift in climate, an event so violent that it reshaped continents. Many scientists believe a massive comet or asteroid fragmented in the skies above North America, striking the ice sheets with unimaginable force. The result was chaos, planet-wide earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, firestorms, and a flood so vast it makes the story of Noah look tame. Glaciers melted in weeks, oceans rose, and walls of water miles high scoured the land. South America, too, bore the scars of agony, geologists would tell. In the Andes, ground evidence of catastrophe was found for sure. Massive boulders transported long distances from their source. Valleys denuded like a wizard passed by with a cosmic pressure washer, and sediments laid down in one fell swoop, an event so traumatic that torrents of water must have come rushing down the mountains. Collapsing buildings and sweeping away all but the hardest rocks would have been the call of the hour in such a spell of fury. Those would have been able to resist the fury of nature. The very monuments that tower over us today, silently speaking to us from their stone walls, terraces, and citadels so enormous that nature herself could not obliterate their memory. Suppose this civilization did exist, then the Younger Dryas would have been its end. Think what it means. Knowledge from generations, stone-shaping techniques, engineering blueprints, and astronomical records. Gone in less than days for the survivors, scattered as oral traditions and myths struggling to see the next sunrise. Gods who could cause mountains to quake with sound or soften stones with strange liquors sound not so much mythic now as fractured echoes of memory. Those survivors' stories, translated for later peoples, must have sounded like stories of giants or deities. To us, they are the faint echoes of a culture erased. Browsing through this erasure explains one of the biggest puzzles. The Incas denied building up to the oldest ruins. Thousands of years had gone by before their empire rose. To them, these stone foundations had relics of a forgotten time, constructed by beings personal, so powerful that they could be defined only as gods. The Incas built their own stone structures above such ruins, but knew that they inherited and did not create. The memory of who had built them truly was very much lost. An acutely haunting thought. Because if this civilization could be completely annihilated, with all its gifted mess being wasted away in time, what would it say about our world? We have become so accustomed to the idea that with our technology, we are invincible. Satellites, data centers, skyscrapers, these all depict permanence. Catastrophe explains their disappearance, but it raises an even bigger question. If such an advanced world was erased once, could it happen again? A warning, written in stone. If the stones of Peru could speak, what would they say? To most, they are monuments of the past, testaments to forgotten hands and silent centuries. But look closer, and they are more than relics. They are messages, warnings, lessons left in a language written not on paper, but in granite, basalt, and diorite.
You see how amazing it is, and they fit these stones perfectly together so you can't even put a slit of paper in there.
Guys, look at this. All of Sacsayhuamán.
A language that says, Civilizations rise, civilizations fall, and no knowledge is too great to vanish. Consider the resilience of these megaliths. Earthquakes that shattered Spanish cathedrals barely nudged them. Floods that scoured valleys left them standing. Even the relentless march of time, rain, wind, and frost, has only polished their surfaces. They were built not for decades, not for centuries, but for millennia. The builders seemed to know that if their world ended, only monuments of unimaginable strength would endure. And they were right. Long after their language and culture were erased, the stones remained, silently daring the future to notice. Now we will juxtapose the lesson with our own world of glass towers, digital networks, and satellites orbiting Earth. Such permanence, such strength. But now take away the electric currents. Erase any record of our digital data from the minds of men. Allow nature to reclaim her cities. And upon what can we lay claim 1,000 years hence? The skyscrapers would topple, bridges would rust to dust, libraries would be consumed in flames or fall into decay. As for our most advanced knowledge, the servers, the cloud, the global internet, it could all be extinguished in a moment by, say, a solar storm or asteroid hit. Survivors 12,000 years from now might only stumble upon a few hardy edifices in their still remaining forms. The Hoover Dam, the pyramids of Las Vegas casinos turned to ruination, and maybe even the carved-out visages of Mount Rushmore. And just like us with Peru, they must have wondered, who would have the willpower to undertake such impossible works? This, I fear, is the awful mirror in which the megaliths hold our reflection. They are not mere echoes of a lost civilization. They give mute testimony that even the most powerful cultures can vanish, leaving only their own remnants as evidence. And upon these remnants shall the living find meaning, concocting stories about gods, giants, or absent sorcerers. Really, they would only be describing us, just like we now describe the Viracocha. But there is another aspect to the warning. Google's AI did not just affirm the existence of a monolithic lost civilization, but proclaimed the idea that inside myths lies a kernel of truth. What we call nonsense may, in fact, be the shadow of the actual science. Sound that could move stone, heat high enough to melt rock. These are technologies that we are just starting to wrap our heads around. But they were once known, were mastered, and are now forgotten. If that happened in the past, it could well happen again. What we should understand by all this is that it's humility now, not fear. The ruins of Peru are thus telling us that knowledge is so fragile and that history is not a linear progression, but rather a cyclical rise, fall, and rediscovery. If there is to be a future for what we leave behind, it must be thought beyond the tender materials of our own age. An awareness of the inevitability of disaster must also accompany such thinking. And remember, our monuments, like theirs, might be the only things left that will remind people of us. The stones of Peru have finally spoken, and with Google's AI, their mystery is no longer just legend. They tell us of a lost civilization erased by disaster, a people advanced enough to rival our own. But if they could vanish, so could we. What other secrets lie buried, waiting for technology to uncover them? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And when the next video appears on your screen, prepare for another truth hidden in plain sight.